Hello, everybody. I'm glad to be here. My name's Laurie Smith, and every year I do normally broadcast for April National Child Abuse Awareness and Prevention Month down in the States. And in Canada, we have one day devoted to uh, National Child Abuse Awareness, but it's just one day. But the States has one whole month. So I usually broadcast sometime during April, normally. Sometimes do audio, sometimes video. I thought I'd do a video today. This is tragic, and I'm not the only way I'm really an expert in this is that I have studied and looked at the issues for many years now since I was on my healing journey because I'm a survivor of child abuse. So I know a lot about it firsthand. So a lot of my friends were abused, and I've done a lot of work within the adult survivors of child abuse communities to, as a supporter, as a survivor supporter, to try to help and make a difference. Um, and so, I do know a lot about the issues of child abuse. I'm not really going to look at all, lengthy stats and this and that because it's really kind of boring. I think the thing to realize is that there's way too much child abuse happening out there all the time, year after year after year. Has been for thousands and thousands of years, ever since time began, probably. Um, and it's really sad. These children out here are they're dying, and they really need answers. Um, you know, the ones that are killed, it's they're done. Their journey on Earth is done. They won't have to suffer anymore, thank God. But what about these children that survive? It's tragic. It really is. Not all of them will go on to abuse their own children, but some do, and carry it on as a sort of a generational um, situation. I know in my case, in my family's case, that's the case. It's generation after generation, most likely, of people abusing their children. So, sort of a learned way of behaving and learned way of treating your children. So it's horrible, and I'm just doing this because I care about children. I only have so much time left on this planet. I really wanted to make a difference, and in this whole mess, since I got started in it, which was about 2009, 2010, right in there. And so, if you can tell by looking at all my stuff, I do talk a lot about child abuse, but it's heartbreaking. It's not a comfortable topic. It's not fun, to talk about child abuse. These issues are not, all that great to hear about. Most people shy away from it. I'm always looking at it head on because because I was abused as a child. So this is part of my life. I can't really escape that. So I'm okay to look at this stuff and to talk about it. But it is really frustrating. And what are the answers? They're still working, government agencies and, local cities, state, agencies in the United States, provincial agencies in Canada and around the world. People are trying to make a difference, but there's just too much of it going on. It's not like it's just happening to just one child in one area. This is a systemic um, pandemic, if you want to use that word. I really don't like whatever. It's always been that, and it will continue to be until people start feeling differently and treating children differently. And it's always was an issue going way back in history. When you study history and you study the issues of how children were treated throughout history, in Roman times, the Roman men could just kill the children for no reason whatsoever. They didn't, and there was no. It wasn't like anybody was going to tell them that they couldn't do that. They were allowed to kill children. They were allowed to kill their own children, um, and it hasn't really gotten any better. Unfortunately, people just get away with killing and murdering children. And sadly enough, sometimes they do a couple of years and then they're back out having more children, killing those children. And so, or somebody else's children, right? This is a really sick society that we live in. It's very sick, it's very twisted, and it has been for a long time. For most people who haven't been abused and have had a nice life, they may not realize that this stuff is really a real reality, right? They maybe think it's something that's only happens to the poor people or only happens to people that are, um, the riffraff of society sort of thing. And it's just not true. So child abuse happens in, wealthy, educated homes just as much as it happens in poor rural areas, right? It's not, economically, socially, limited, right? Many times, I mean, people just it's just whoever abuses a child. I mean, it's just terrible. I want to look at some stats here, and I'm going to take a look at the. I'm not just going to read a few because, like I said, I'm not really interested in getting into the major, massive stats because there are that. This document's 309 pages long. Child maltreatment 2021, and this is from Department of Health and Human Services, NCANDS, National Child Abuse and Neglect Data System. So this is their report for 2021. And it's not good. They said, I'm just reading right from their download. You can grab this. It's a 309-page document detailing the actual stats of children abused last in 2021. They're always a year behind, and I mean now they're 2 years. The 2022 report hasn't really even come out yet, and that's the one that I would have liked to have, but I would have had to order it. Um, this one's actually online, the 2021. So as of 2021, this was the year 2021 in the United States only, and also the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia. Um, 51 states submitted both a child file and agency file, and one state had not reported. So 51 states in 2021, a nationally estimated 3,016,000 children received either an investigation response or an alternative response at a rate of 40.7 children per 1,000 in the population. That's 3 million reports that were made that they either received an investigation or an alternative response. In 51 states reported 588,229 victims of child abuse and neglect. So that's almost 600,000. Right? They're saying estimations for because of the missing data, there would be 600,000 victims of maltreatment in 2021. 600,000. That's a lot, folks. That's only what's being reported. That's only what's being known about. So multiply that by what, 4 or 5? That'll give you more of an accurate number. Because a lot of child abuse is not reported. A lot of it is not even known. People live their whole lives and nobody knows that these children have been abused. And if they aren't killed, they just go on to live these horrible lives and they think that that's life. This is how you do life, right? And that, many of them don't get help. Some of them go on to live probably decent lives and just try to forget about the abuse that they suffered. And so many more will have horrible lives. It's just a terrible situation out there. They said that in this 2021 data, 3/4, which was 76% of victims are neglected, 16% physically abused, 10% sexually abused, and 0.2% sex trafficked. Said a national estimated 1,820, like 1,800 children died from abuse and neglect. That was just in 2021, but that's only if they actually reported it as abuse, and that's just reality. Some children are killed at the hands of a caregiver or somebody that's gotten a hold of a child and they actually report it non-abuse. And this does happen a bit. So, I mean, I would say that number is probably a lot higher. Would it be double? Could be, you know, because for whatever reason, it wasn't reported as abuse, right? The child's death. Because the parents can fake maybe it's a choking incident. They say the child choked on something. And, or, any number of things like that where the parent could set it up or the caregiver, whoever was around that child, could set it up and say that it was an accident. So I think that it's a lot higher than that. That's just what they know. Known murders, known deaths of children. This is murder, folks. Downright, absolute murder of a helpless, innocent baby. It just breaks my heart. And the reason why it does is because there's no reason for this. If parents can't cope, there's many, many ways that you can get help. A lot of times people, I don't know why they want to keep these children. They just think, maybe they don't want to get a bad name as to say, like if a parent's struggling and any parent, any age, struggling with with their life conditions and their life situation, and they can't cope and they're abusing that child. They don't want people to think that they're a horrible person, so that's why they don't let the child go. And so they keep the child, and that way they're not looked down upon by their peers or their family, right? And a lot of times that's the case. And the reason I know that's because that's what happened with my own parents. They were brought up on child abuse charges. We were um, the courts wanted to remove us from the home. There was a lot of children involved because I'm the last of seven. But my mom didn't want to look like a bad mother, right? So she should have just let us all go, right? But I confronted her about that later. I talk about that in all my child abuse stuff, but she didn't want to look like a bad person because she wanted to blame it on my dad. But it was both of my parents were both abusing all the children, right? So all of us. So it was just a horrible situation. And this happens, folks, right? It's not just sometimes because parents are struggling and they're poor. That's a lot of times that's what the media will present. Oh, they were just having such difficulty. You know, it's like a lot of times people just really want to hurt those children, you know, and um, that's part of their life. That's what they do, right? And that's why if they lose those children and then they're young enough and they have more, they tend to do the same thing to the next group. They don't have any remorse or any feeling for children, so they shouldn't be having children, right? It's really, really discouraging. These poor children don't deserve that. It's absolutely horrific. So that's the stats from the child maltreatment 2021 document there. And that I got off the website. It's the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Administration for Children and Families, Administration on Children, Youth, and Families Children's Bureau. So that's the website. It's welfare.gov, I think it is. Childwelfare.gov. That's where I got this information from. So that's just sad. And there's so much more we could talk about there, but I'm not going to bother because stats are just stats. Children are dying, and it's horrible. What I've been following is this case right now in Florida where this little guy, I can't remember his name, but it's just a horrific situation. His name is I think it's Taylin, Tayle, and Taylin Mosley. Um, he had been missing. His the family had been asking the public's help to help find him. The father had killed his mother and in his apartment and stabbed her, I guess, or somehow killed the mother. The child was missing. This little 2-year old. I think he was 2 years old. And yes, 2 years old. And the father showed up at the hospital with a bunch of wounds, like cut wounds on his arms and stuff, wherever. And the boy was missing. And then the police were investigating, and they found the boy in an alligator's mouth. And so they shot the alligator, and the alligator dropped the boy, and the boy was already dead. Right. So they are investigating to see how that child died. But this is not okay, folks. You know what I mean? And it's like, where in the families does if people in families are realizing that there's problems in the home and there's problems with those children, they need to step up to the plate and take the child as into their custody. It's like that should have never ever happened, and this is just not okay. A lot of people say, well, it's just our lifestyle. This is how we live. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of that where people just have all these crazy lives, and they want to be allowed to keep their children in this crazy life. Is that okay? Not if you're going to allow your child to be killed, abused, sexually abused, trafficked for whatever reason. And this is going on, folks, all over the place. I mean, it's just horrific. I'm going to look at two stories here that are really discouraging. And I'll give you the website because it's really an amazing website, actually. This guy, he's been doing a lot of work for many, many years. He used to actually, he was kind of one of the people that used to support my work and sort of share it around when I first started doing my child abuse prevention stuff. And he's really an amazing guy. He's got an amazing not-for-profit. It's called Invisible Children, www.invisibleChildren.org. And this is Mike Tikkanen. And he's got articles there all the time, current sort of updated information about what's happening with the issues of child abuse and current cases and things like this and different stuff. So it's really worth checking into. And he has these stories there that, this one is just horrific. This is from Kids at Risk Action Care Group Invisible Children, Mike Tikkanen. And he's actually reporting on a Safe Passage for Children investigation, which is it's a recent report that was given um, looking at child death in Minnesota. So it doesn't matter what state these children are from. This is typical. It's just typical of what children are facing, and which then it ends up killing the child, right? It's just horrific. So I'm going to just look at some of this. I don't think I'm going to read the whole entire thing. I'm just going to read pieces of it. 2-year-old Sophia O'Neill death and why, from the Safe Passage investigative report. It says this is one of 88 stories of children dying at the hands of their caregivers reported in this recent Safe Passage for Children investigation of child death in Minnesota. So they said the report suggests why this tragedy is happening in our state and how we can make life safer for at-risk children. So they said, if in reading in the read more at the end of the article, please share this with your contacts and state representative. They want people to be aware of this stuff. This is happening, and something needs to be done. Sophia O'Neill, Hennepin County. Sophia O'Neill was 2 years old when she was killed by her mother's boyfriend, who had been watching Sophia while her mother was at work. And in an interview with police, the boyfriend described his frustration with attempting to get Sophia to stop crying and said he just snapped on her, quote unquote. The boyfriend said he had put her in a corner and kicked her in the back, which he demonstrated using a doll. And when the police asked how hard he kicked the child, he said, quote unquote, it was bad, it was hard. An hour or two later, when Sophia was still crying, the boyfriend demonstrated how he laid Sophia's face down on the floor and stomped on her back. And this is a 2-year-old child. And that's a grown guy. And this is not okay, but this is what's happening. And it's heartbreaking. How you could do that to a child, I don't know. I don't know what would cause somebody to behave this way. I think there's too much leniency. When people are found, this is me speaking, this is my opinion, and I'm allowed to say it because I want to. People are found guilty of child abuse like that, of killing and murdering a child. What if the child dies of their injuries and the person's found completely 100% guilty? Don't bother wasting our taxpayer money to keep them in jails. I think we should go back to the noose. I think we should go back to hanging people and take care of the problem. You know what I mean? Why should that guy get to live when he took that 2-year-old's little life, right? And we have to start caring about children. And when is it gonna happen, right? I find this it's just heartbreaking, and this is why most people don't want to look at this. This is why, and I would say, hey, if you want to be a wimp, go ahead. You know, if you don't want to look at reality and the truth of what's really going on, whatever, right? But buzz off, right? It's really sad. This is why this is still happening, and this is why this is going to continue happening because people don't care, right? So, following her death, Child Protection completed an investigation and made maltreatment findings of physical abuse and sexual abuse of the deceased child by her mother's boyfriend, as well as finding of neglect against the child's mother for failure to protect the child. And while attempting to resuscitate Sophia, doctors noted bruising on several areas of her body, including her arms, back, and abdomen. A CT scan showed that Sophia suffered significant non-accidental trauma, including left kidney split in half, right kidney hematoma, a pancreas split in two, 8 acute rib fractures, and at least 1 healing rib fracture, a collapsed lung, deep bruising to her scalp, and lacerations to her stomach, small intestine, and liver. A 2-year-old. I mean, this is just unbelievable. Like, it's like, what are people thinking? You know? And why would you leave your child with your boyfriend who's treating your child like that? Why would you do that? Like, this is just, it's just absolutely horrific. They said prior to the fatality, Child Protection Services received 4 maltreatment reports related to Sophia, and 3 of which were opened for FA. One of the family assessments was in response to a report that Sophia's mother had a car accident with Sophia in the car, and the mother was charged with DWI. And the final FA conducted on the family prior to the fatality was a response to a report of physical abuse of Sophia by the boyfriend. In that instance, Sophia's biological father created a video showing 2 bruises on her cheek and records Sophia saying that the boyfriend had punched her in the face. The disposition of this family assessment was development of a safety plan requiring the mother to keep the boyfriend away from the infant, which she failed to do. I mean, this is just an ongoing thing. Like, why would you? What's going on I blame the mother in this instance because you don't let somebody do that to your child. That's not okay, right? And they're both guilty, right? They both should be strung up, as far as I'm concerned. That's just how I feel about it. That's why I don't do this stuff all the time anymore because it's so unbelievably evil, absolute evil that people keep getting away with it. And they might do a few years in jail, like I said, and then they're out on good behavior, and they get to finish off their lives after they murdered their children. Right? It's just so discouraging, right? And they said instead they use this case to demonstrate a common situation in which criteria from the guidelines should have prevented this and similar reports from being assigned to family assessment. They include the maltreatment alleged is criminally chargeable. There is a potential for serious physical, emotional, or psychological harm. The frequency, similarity, or recency of past events warrants a traditional investigation. The child is unable to protect herself for reasons such as age or disability. What child can protect themselves? No child can protect themselves from an abuser, right? The parent legal guardian is incapacitated due to active use of dangerous substances, and the parent legal guardian does not have friends or relatives that can help care for the child. So the mother was able to continue leaving a 2-year-old child with her abuser. And since the services were only screened in for assessment and voluntary services, there was no oversight of mom and no safety net for Sophia. And it's important to note that the case was closed less than a month after being screened in against the boyfriend. So they did nothing. They did nothing to try to help save this little girl. And she's dead, right? Thank God she didn't have to suffer anymore. But it's just so tragic. It really is. It's unbelievable. And then we're going to look at this one. We're just looking at two because, like I said, this is so heartbreaking and so disturbing that we could just go on and on and on because there's thousands and thousands of these articles every year. Just in North America alone, there's who knows how many reports, 4,000, real verified cases of children being murdered and killed. That's between Canada and the States because it's happening up here too, folks. Just in case people don't realize that. Quite a bit of it's happening up here. I'm following it, watching it. Nothing's being done. Nobody cares, right? There's a handful of people that care, but they can't really. What are you supposed to do? We have to educate people and change the way they feel about children. Children are not punching bags. They're not. If you don't want a crying baby, don't have children because babies are going to cry. They're going to cry a lot, and children are going to throw fits and tantrums, right? And you just better get used to it. Don't have a child if you can't deal with that stuff, right? Too many people do. I mean, I'm so paranoid now that I hear a child crying and I'm thinking they better not be abusing that child. Children do cry. And so, yeah, that's where, in your mind you're thinking, man, I'm going to be watching for, repetition type stuff, right? Repeated type stuff. Because, and, listening to other adults. Are they screaming? Is there loud noises going on? This is happening around you. It's happening around you. It's happening around me. It's everywhere, right? And nobody's doing anything. So children are dying, right? How sad, right? It really is pathetic. We'll look at this one. This is from the same invisiblechildren.org. And this is CARA, Kids at Risk Action, CARA Group. Mike Tikkanen, Tikkanan, I think that's how you spell his name. I could be wrong. Tikkanen? Anyway, I'll have to get that for you later. It's not right here in front of me. This is the 88 stories of children dying at the hands of their caregivers reported in the recent Safe Passage for Children investigation of child death in Minnesota. So this is another one of the 88 stories. Tavion Davis, Hennepin County. So this is the same county, another child. The case of Tavion Davis exemplifies chronic multi-type maltreatment and how the child welfare system responded to it. In 2006, prior to his birth, Tavion's mother and 2 other adult relatives held down and beat a child who was later one of Tavion's siblings. The mother was convicted of malicious punishment of a child. From this time until Tavian's death in 2018 at age 8, at least 10 known subsequent child protection reports were made alleging physical abuse, sexual abuse, and neglect. The family's child protection history included an accident in 2015 in which Tavian and two of his siblings were involved in a car accident. The mother refused treatment for the children and removed them from the hospital against medical advice. Why do they do that? Because they don't want that child, the abuse to be discovered. And that's exactly what happened in my case. Because several times I needed to go to the hospital and my parents would not get me any medical help because they didn't want they had already been brought up on child abuse charges and they'd already gone to court and already been found guilty. And but the courts said, okay, as long as you meet this criteria, the children can stay in the home. And so, I needed medical attention several times, and my sister did as well. But they don't want to take the children because they don't want them to see what's going on and discover the abuse, right? So they said the county responded by assigning the case to family assessment. Court records also document that over these years, the children were hit on the hands with a hammer, beaten with a metal rod, whipped with a belt, burned with boiling water or chemicals, threatened with death if they talked about the abuse, deprived of food and sleep as punishments, and were continuously exposed to household hazards, including accessible guns. And they said, as with the case of Sophia O'Neill, the question arises whether some medical providers other than the specialists noted below may have noticed injuries in these children over this lengthy period of time and should have reported them. However, there's no information to clarify this in the court records. During 2015, there were 4 separate allegations of sexual abuse against Tavian and or his siblings, with 4 separate perpetrators in a span of 9 months, including a juvenile relative, the oldest sibling, a cousin, and an unrelated male. 4 separate allegations of sexual abuse. Maltreatment determinations were made against 3 of the 4 perpetrators. The oldest sibling was moved out of the home during the investigation, but the court ordered that the child to be returned home over the objection at the local department. And the father of the children knew about the sexual abuse and according to the court record, told the children he would break their arms and legs if they told anyone about it. This is the same situation in my case because my brother was sexually abusing me and raping me, and there was nothing done about it. And had anything been done about it, the courts would have allowed my brother to stay in the home. They would have maybe removed him for a little while, or removed me, and then we would have all been brought back together. This is how it works, folks. This is how it works. They think that if a few months away will calm the situation down. I don't think so. When somebody wants to hurt a child, they don't care. They want to sexually use a child, they're going to do it. It doesn't matter how much time's gone by, right? This is demonic. It really is. It's very evil. It's demonic, and I, for one, I'm tired of it. It just makes me so, so sad for these children. Because that this year there'll be another 2,000 or more children dying at the hands of their abusers. That's deaths. That's not children being abused. There'll be another 3-4 million, reports made. The findings, there'll be another 700,000-800,000 children found are being abused, right? And who's doing what? Nothing. Nobody's doing anything because nobody cares. Children are not important in our society, and nobody cares about them. And this is, okay, a large percentage of the world cares about their children. That's why the whole world's not abusing children, which is wonderful. But what I'm saying is, in general, children are, there's no reason to save them. They're not part of the let's make our country big and good. They are our future, but people are not. They don't care about that. They care about the here and now, and how many dollars they can get right now for whatever their mission is, right? They don't care about trying to find situations to help children, right? It's not how they don't care, and they don't want to pump too much money into it because it's expensive, right? It's costing the world a fortune, this issue of child abuse. It is. So this is really, really sad. Early in 2018, Tavian's mother forced him to spend the night in the garage in below zero temperatures. He froze to death on February 1st, 2018. And while the proximate cause of Tavian's death was freezing, the physician who performed the autopsy noted extensive linear and looped injuries and scars on him, which were present in December 2015 evaluation. But there were more prominent at the time of his death, indicating ongoing physical abuse. It was later confirmed that the mother frequently whipped the children with a belt. And he had all sorts of sexual abuse as well, sexual trauma, you know, just terrible. I'm not going to read that, but it's just so sad, um, because out there there's children. I mean, out there in the world, there's parents who, for whatever reason, can't have children. And they'd love to have children. They'd love to treat them right. You know, and then there's all these other monsters killing their children, and it just doesn't seem fair. It doesn't seem right. It's not right. It's a sad situation. I would love to have children. I couldn't have afforded to have children, to be honest with you, but I would have loved to have children. I love children. I think children are wonderful, and I don't have any because I was raped as a child, so I was not able to carry a child, and I was only able to become pregnant one time, and after that, I was never able to become pregnant again. I lost my baby halfway through. Um, so my husband and I were devastated about that, but what are you going to do? And we didn't have, he was diagnosed terminally ill. People say, well, you could have, adopted or whatever. Not in the situation with him being terminally ill and, a lack of funds and income. You need to be able to provide for these children, right? So it just didn't work for me, unfortunately, because I was abused as a child, right? But the thing is that, there's normal people out there, and even people who have been abused that love children, would never hurt a child, never ever. And then you've got these monsters out here who love to hurt children, right? And it just seems so unfair. It really is. I think the laws need to be tougher, and I think that they shouldn't be allowed to just have children and then abuse them, kill them, and then get a few years in jail and then be let out to kill more children. I think they should be killed themselves. Eye for an eye. You take a life. You kill a child in cold blood murder. You should be killed yourself. That's how I feel about it. They should. It's an eye for an eye. That child's life, you die too. But then people say, well, what about the other children? Well, if they abused that one child and killed the other children, killed that child, what are they doing to the other children? No, they're useless. In my book, they're useless. And I just think the laws are not tough enough. That's what I think. People know, oh, I can kill my child. Doesn't really matter. I'm only going to get a couple of years in prison. That's what they're thinking in their minds. Or get off for good behavior, whatever. They don't care. They're obviously sick and twisted individuals who could do that to a child. And so they don't care if they go do some years in prison, right? Get some free food and, get to watch TV and hang out with their pals. And then they get out and then they go and they pop out another couple kids and abuse them too. Traffic them or whatever, right? They don't care. Those are the people I'm talking about, found guilty, that should just be given life sentences and put on death row. That's what I think. That's my take on it. That's what they deserve, right? So, yeah, it's just really sad. So that's the rest of that article. 10 ways to help prevent child abuse. This is from preventchildabuseamerica.org. Preventchildabuse.org. So 10 ways to help prevent child abuse. I think this is good. They said, number one, be a nurturing parent. So yeah, I mean, hey, don't abuse your child if you're a parent, right? Be a nurturing parent. Children need to know that they're special, loved, capable of following their dreams, right? They deserve to be able to fulfill those dreams, to live it out long enough to be able to do that, right? They said, help a friend, neighbor, or relative. Being a parent isn't easy, so offering a helping hand, take care of the children so the parents can rest or spend time together, right? Help parents who are struggling, especially single parents, who, need some extra support because they are a single parent. That's got to be tough, right? They're trying to bring up their children, and in the meantime, they're their sole support. That's hard, and that's a lot of people are in that situation, unfortunately. Help yourself. So they said, if you're a parent and you're struggling, when the big and little problems of your everyday life pile up to the point you feel overwhelmed and out of control, take time out. Don't take it out on your kids, right? And if your baby cries, number 4, it can be frustrating to hear your baby cry. So this is for parents, right? Learn what to do if your baby won't stop crying. Never shake a baby. Shaking a child may result in severe injury or death, right? Number 5, get involved. Ask your community leaders, clergy, library, and schools to develop services to meet the needs of healthy children and families. Number 6, help to develop parenting resources at your local library. Number 7, promote programs in school. So teaching children, parents, and teachers prevention strategies can help to keep children safe, and especially with CSA child sexual abuse for children, to learn about, my body belongs to me, right? To learn how to keep themselves safe, right? Monitor your child's television, video, and internet viewing and usage, definitely. Volunteer at a local child abuse prevention program. So um, that's why, I just volunteer my time. There's only so much I can do. You know what I mean? It's just to speak out and be a voice, right, for these children out here. But there's so many other people who maybe have more resources and more time who can get involved, right? Report suspected abuse or neglect. So if you have a reason to believe a has been or may be harmed, call your local Department of Children and Family Services or your local police department. Actually call both. If you're going to report abuse, you got to learn how to report it properly, because you don't want the case to be thrown out in court. Then the child ends up staying in the home or staying with the abusers, right? You got to know how to report it. And also, I would make a police report as well as the local or the state level, whatever provincial level government reporting, because there should be a police report as well, because child abuse is a crime. Yes, it is. It's a crime punishable by the law if they find you and they bust you and you are busted. And I really wish that we could get them all and find them all and bust them all before they kill their children, but unfortunately, it's not going to happen. We're going to have so many more killed. And it's very sad and tragic and frustrating for those who want to save children's lives and work so hard to save children's lives. These professionals out here who are trying to help save children's lives. It's horrible. So what are the signs and symptoms? It's very important. I've gone over and over and over this stuff. This is for the last 10, 12 years. But it's so important, right? This, how do you know if a child's being abused? How can you tell? Children are not always going to come up to you and say, they're being abused. It's quite often they're going to hide it, right? Because they've either been threatened at home, or maybe they love one of the parents, and one of the parents is abusing the other parent and the children, and they don't want to be taken away from their other parent because they love their parent, or maybe they even love that abuser, which was my case. A lot of times children actually don't want to be removed from their home because they love their parents, right? And you know, they don't want to be responsible for breaking up the family, which may have been told to them. Don't tell, because then because you'll get us in trouble, and then we'll be taken away, right? And the child, of course, fears that because they know what they're getting at home. That was my situation. It's kind of like, well, I could have hit the streets, but I thought, well, at least I know who's abusing me, right? Instead of some stranger. It's terrible, really terrible. So recognizing signs of abuse, so important. Following signs may signal the presence of child abuse or neglect. And this is from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Administration for Children and Families, Administration on Children, Youth and Families, Children's Bureau. So it's www.childwelfare.gov. This is where I got this. It's the PDF that looks at the signs and symptoms of child abuse, right? So they said the child shows sudden changes in behavior or school performance. The child has not received help for physical or medical problems brought to the parent's attention. The child has learning problems or difficulty concentrating that cannot be attributed to specific physical or psychological causes. The child is always watchful, as though preparing for something bad to happen. The child lacks adult supervision, is overly compliant, passive, or withdrawn. Comes to school or other activities early, stays late, and does not want to go home. Shows little concern for the child. The parent, but this is not the parent. The parent shows little concern for the child, denies the existence of or blames the child for the child's problems in school or at home. Asks teachers or other caregivers to use harsh physical discipline if the child misbehaves. Sees the child as entirely bad, worthless, or burdensome. This is all the stuff that I had to go through, right? Demands a level of physical or academic performance the child cannot achieve. Looks primarily to the child for care, attention, and satisfaction of emotional needs. So, the parent and child rarely touch or look at each other. They consider their relationship entirely negative, and they state that they do not like each other. That's kind of, I guess, in a situation where, if there was a situation where someone was going to ask that child, how do you feel about your do you love your mommy or something like that? A child might say no. Normally they say yes, right? Even if they're being abused, it's a heart wrenching thing, right? That's why you see these pictures of these children, just like that little I keep forgetting his name, Talon Moses, I think. I don't even have it here anymore. The one who was found in the alligator's mouth. He this is the last photo of him is he's smiling. He looks happy. Children who are going through traumatic experiences doesn't mean that they have uh, always look like they're being abused. Many times they're just smiling, especially if somebody compliments them, taking a photo, because it makes them feel special all of a sudden because they don't get much attention, right? So, or it gets the wrong attention. If it's neglect, they're not getting the attention they need. If it's abuse, they're getting the wrong kind of attention, which is whatever emotional, psychological, physical, sexual abuse, right? So many times children, they'll be happy if somebody comes along and says something nice to them, and of course they're going to smile, and they're going to be like, that smile will come on their face, and that picture's taken, and then 2 weeks later they're found dead, right? Or they die because of their injuries. It's really horrific and it's really tragic and it makes me mad. It pisses me off because I'm a survivor. That's why. It makes me angry that these little children are being abused out here and nobody gives a shit, right? Sorry, folks, I can say that if I want to. It's really frustrating. It is because it seems like the world just doesn't care. I think it's just because of what he's supposed to do. Well, keep your eyes open. Watch out for the children around you. That's what you can do, right? So these are the types of abuse. There's neglect, physical abuse, neglect, child sexual abuse, emotional abuse, right? It's important to know that these are typically found in combinations more than alone, right? So a physically abused child, for example, is often emotionally abused as well, and a sexually abused child may also be neglected, right? It's all. That's why in my case it was all of it. It was all together. All the sexual abuse happened for a period of time, but all the other abuse was just all mixed together, right? So it's not always the case, but it's more than likely, right? Signs of physical abuse, it's just horrific. Consider the possibility of physical abuse when the child has unexplained burns, bites, bruises, broken bones, or black eyes. You better be looking out for that stuff. Children shouldn't have unexplained black eyes and bruises and broken bones. Unexplained, right? They might say, "Oh, I fell down, right? Or I fell off the swing, or I fell off, whatever, or tripped, or they might have some excuse, right? You got to be looking into this stuff. They have fading bruises or other marks noticeable after an absence from school. You better believe that, because children, if they're the physical abuse is so harsh that it marks their children up, they'll keep them home, right? Seems frightened of the parents and protests or cries when it's time to go home. Shrinks at the approach of adults. Reports injury by a parent or another adult caregiver. Consider the possibility of physical abuse when the child or a parent or another adult caregiver offers conflicting, unconvincing, or no explanation for the child's injury, describes the child as evil or in some other very negative way. That was my case. My mother was always saying that I was such a horrible, bad child, I deserved to be treated that way. Right? Uses harsh physical discipline with the child, has a history of abuse as a child. That was my mother and my dad. So it's just horrific, right? Signs of neglect. Consider the possibility of neglect when the child is frequently absent from school, begs or steals food or money, lacks needed medical or dental care, immunizations or glasses, is consistently dirty and has severe body odor, lacks sufficient clothing for the weather, abuses alcohol or other drugs, and states that there's no one at home to provide care. Right? Children shouldn't be having to go through all that, through none of this stuff I've been talking about. Consider the possibility of neglect when the parent or caregiver appears to be indifferent to the child, seems apathetic or depressed, behaves irrationally or in a bizarre manner, and is abusing alcohol or other drugs. Signs of sexual abuse. Consider the possibility of sexual abuse when the child has difficulty walking or sitting, suddenly refuses to change for gym or to participate in physical activities. That was my case. Reports nightmares or bedwetting. Experiences a sudden change in the appetite, demonstrates bizarre, sophisticated, or unusual sexual knowledge or behavior. That's also my case. becomes pregnant or contracts a venereal disease, particularly if under age 14, runs away, reports sexual abuse by a parent or another adult caregiver. Consider the possibility of sexual abuse when the parent or other adult caregiver is unduly protective of the child or severely limits the child's contact with other children, especially the opposite sex, is secretive and isolated, and is jealous or controlling with family members. And I mean, we're going to look at another page of what you can do to prevent child sexual abuse. Signs of emotional maltreatment. Consider the possibility of emotional maltreatment when the child shows extremes in behavior such as overly compliant or demanding behavior, extreme passivity or aggression, is either inappropriately adult, like an adult parenting other children, for example, or inappropriately infantile, frequently rocking or banging their head banging, right? Is delayed in physical or emotional development. And that was all of us, right? Has attempted suicide, reports a lack of attachment to the parent. Consider the possibility of emotional maltreatment when the parent or other adult caregiver constantly blames, belittles, or berates the child, is unconcerned about the child, and refuses to consider offers for help for the child's problems. It overtly rejects the child. So that's it, folks. You have got to know the signs and the symptoms of child abuse in order to know how to report it, and that you should report it, and that you're actually required by law as an adult to report it. If you know that a child's being abused and you don't report it, by law, that makes you guilty by not reporting it. Right? It's the right thing to do. Right? Child sexual abuse prevention. This is from Prevent Child Abuse America, and this not very, I don't know, it's not a great article, but I just wanted to look at some of this because they said nearly 90% of CSA occurs within families or involves someone the child or family knows and trusts. And that's the reason, because children, where does CSA child sexual abuse generally happen? It's normally happens where the child is. The child has to be present for this. So where's the child being abused? Where's the child at? At home, usually. It's not wherever the child is, that's where the CSA child sexual abuse is going to happen. It's normally somebody that has access to that child. So whether it's a teacher, whether it's a family member, a friend of the family who has access to the child, whether it's a neighbor who has access to the child, somebody that babysits, babysitters, anybody, daycares, daycare workers, anybody where the child is. It can happen in schools, daycares, you name it, wherever the child is. Camping trips, churches, church activities, wherever the child is, this is where this stuff is happening. And you better know that this can happen to your child. Your child could be sexually abused by anybody. And you may think this person, that's with your child is that your child is with is a safe individual. How do you know? You better know who's around your children. They said in 2019, approximately 47,000 children had a substantiated CSA child welfare case. And they said this is likely an underestimate of the problem. So that's 47,000 children out of, I mean, this is the United States. This is a study done in the USA, obviously. But I would say it's triple that, because this is, it's just going on. It goes on all over the place. And most of the time, if a child tells somebody and isn't believed, most likely they will never ever tell anybody ever again. And they might tell one person, and if that one person blows it off, doesn't believe, or is actually part of the problem, then the child won't bother to tell anybody else. They just keep it to themselves and just endure what they're having to endure, right, to get by. And how do I know? Because I know so many survivors of child sexual abuse, and I'm one myself. So it's horrific. Limiting the amount of one-to-one adult child ratio is really important. And that's just the way it is, folks, because in families, people hate to admit that in families children are being abused, right? And I mean, it's bad enough to think that a teacher or coach or daycare worker or some babysitter or something, some non-familial person got a hold of a child and sexually abused them, that's bad enough, or some stranger danger at the store, which happens, right? Quite a bit, actually. What's really sad is that people do not want to admit that this happens in families, whether it's a parent or a sibling or an aunt or an uncle or grandma or grandpa or somebody from the extended family, cousins, you name it, folks, it's going on. Yeah. And people hate to talk about it. That's why I do. I'm a survivor of incest, CSA, child sexual abuse. And you know what? The shame doesn't belong to me, but it belongs to the abuser, right? The shame belongs to my abuser, not to me. And so, I can talk about this, right? It's very important that we do talk about this. And you have to limit the amount of activity, and you have to, if you're an adult, if you're a parent, you have children, you cannot just allow your children to go running around with anybody. You better know who those people are, and you better know where your child is at all times. And, you have to teach your children that they need to be aware of their own bodies and that they do have the right to say no. They have the right to say no, and they have the right to get help. If someone does something to them that is not okay and it's inappropriate sexually, that child should know how to get help. Your child should know. It's very important. Age appropriately. You teach them at the age appropriate times of what is appropriate to teach your child about their bodies and about sexuality and what's okay and what's not okay. And that, there are people out there, not everybody's a bad person. Not everybody wants to hurt children. There's good people out there that want to be involved with children, thank God. But there's also bad people out there too that want to hurt children and want to use them for their own purposes. And it's like, you need to know how to teach your children how to be safe, right? It's just so important. So, limiting one-on-one contact with adults and children, unless you really know that person. And even then, it doesn't always work, because in daycare situations, for example, there could be 5 or 6 daycare workers in a daycare that sexually abuse children. And in that case, the one-on-one thing doesn't work because there's more than one. And if they all agree that that's fine and they're going to do this, they actually do bust daycare workers doing this stuff all the time. Then, they just hush it up. Nobody knows. And there's several adults in it. And that's really basically trafficking, really, when you want to think about it. They're just trafficking these little children between each other, right? It's really sick and twisted. It's got to stop. And I wish I had, 2 or 3 more lifetimes. And I wish I really did have 2 or 3 lifetimes and more money to get involved, because I would be doing several different things with my time. Unfortunately, I don't. And I'm getting older and there's only so much I can do, but I'd just like to be a voice out here for these little children out here who are going to die tonight, and they're going to die tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And they need you to get involved. Do what you can. Be a voice. Spread the word, and get involved in your own local communities, right? So important. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I appreciate it. And, children are the future, and we need to protect them. And they are precious, and they do not deserve to be abused. We need to change the way that society feels about children. We really do. Children are not put here to be used in any sort of way or abused in any sort of way. Because these little children grow up to be you, and they grow up to be me, right? And I didn't deserve that. Neither do they. God bless you all. Take care.